All right, folks. Tommy Sibiga here, checking in on week 8 of Plus One. And so we'll start off by a check in of your action items from the week previous, which was all about objection handling. And guess what? Today we're working with sellers, and there's going to be some objections that you'll be faced with working with sellers. So, good thing that we had this lesson last week, because you may be seeing some of the same material again in the week ahead, as well as just when you actually go on some listing appointments. And so action items last week that we want to check on is to write down the 3 objections you hear most often, and then write down 3 objection handlers for each of those possibilities. So hopefully you did that in last week's time. And then checking in to see if you made 15 COI phone contacts as well as 15 handwritten notes. So pretty easy there. If you made a phone call to somebody, you can then send a note to that person saying, hey, thanks for chatting on the phone. Or you could come up with some other handwritten notes to some other folks. And then 5 pop buys. So that was last week's homework of action items. Hopefully you were able to get all those accomplished. And then this week, now we're talking about working with sellers. This is the fun part. Definitely the easiest way of managing your time is working with more sellers, list to last, all that good stuff. So working with sellers, we're going to start off with the idea of pre-qualifying the appointment or pre-qualifying your sellers. You do this with buyers, right? You always ask them questions of, how much you think they are comfortable with, where are they looking, what are their must-haves in a home. So you ask lots of different questions so you can best help a buyer look to purchase a home. We need to do the same thing with our sellers. And so this can be done over a phone call, your first conversation with folks. A lot of times I'll send a follow-up email and maybe ask them more specifics about the house. Sometimes too, I'll verbally kind of ask some of the questions and say, hey, just so I have a good, record of things, I'm also going to send you an email. It's going to be asking some of the same questions, but, I'll send that to you here shortly. But very important to kind of pre-qualify. And so here's some of the examples or things that you might want to ask before you actually meet with somebody. And so one of the first things, it would be, hey, before I come out, there are a few questions I need to ask you a better idea of your plan. So that sound reasonable. You say, sure. So you said, so first thing to maybe ask is, you said you were moving to, blank, right? You want to find out where they're moving to and in essence, why are they moving? So the next question there is why are you moving there? With that, you also want to try to figure out timeline. So if they're saying, hey, I'm taking a new job and it starts 6 months from now, then you probably don't want to sell the house, today. So you need to kind of figure all these things out so you can best be prepared and figure out the best strategy and your own kind of effort in terms of working with them. So how soon do you need to be there? If it's 3 months, great. So some other questions, just kind of asking this pre-qualifying of the listing appointment would be, if I sell your home in the next 30 days, would that be a problem, or that puts a problem? Like, we still have 6 months before we need to move to Alaska or whatever it is, and we'd be totally homeless. You kind of need to know this stuff. Another good question would be, what would happen if we didn't sell your house? And you say, oh, well then, we're going to have to rent it out, or, we're going to be foreclosed on, or whatever it may be. So another question you might ask is, do you plan to interview more than one agent for the job of selling your home? Be good information to know if you're competing against other folks, or if they say, no, we're not talking to anybody else, you're our guy or girl. Another question, do you plan, when I see you, how much do you want to list your home for realistically? So this is a question that I usually put in an email. It's one of the last questions that I usually ask, but it's good to know before you're going into the appointment whether the person's going to be living in reality or in fantasy land. So if the house you're seeing the numbers be a $400,000 house, and they say, hey, we're not going to sell it for a dime less than $600, boy, that's going to change the vibe and the mood of your listing appointment. The entire way through, because in essence you're going to already be fighting or at odds as it relates to price. And so with that, you might come even more prepared or more armed with better comps or better numbers to kind of justify your recommendation there. So As a real estate professional agent, I study homes and prices every day. Therefore, I assume you'll list with me at the price that'll cause your home to sell, correct? So again, you're just kind of setting the stage of getting the actual signed listing. What's the price you won't go below? Another good question is how much do you owe on the property? Similarly, if you think the house is worth 400 and they've refinanced a bunch of different times and taken out home equity lines and their balance is 600,000, that could be an issue. So, some other questions. I'm just gonna kind of scan through here. You'll see it in your papers there, but some of the questions I have on my email would be rate your house from 1 to 10 and have them kind of give their own grading of the condition of their house. And then with that, I follow that up with what would make it a 10. And so if they're already telling me that, man, the entire carpet needs to be replaced, or, the kitchen is super dated, or, the air conditioning's not working, again, that just helps me best prepare for giving them advice and counsel on what are the best things for us to do before listing. So I always like the idea of them ranking it and then saying what would make it a 10. Another good question is what motivated them, or what did they like the best about the house before they bought it. Again, that's a good positive attribute that I'm probably going to want to use later on to really lift up the listing for future buyers, because obviously, or maybe naturally, if they liked it when they bought, the next person probably going to also like that same attribute in the future. Another one would be, do you have any questions before I arrive? Is there anything that I need to already have an answer for, before we meet? That's a good one. I also usually let folks know it should only take about 45 minutes. I like to try to communicate an appropriate expectations. Now, listing appointments, they can last a really long time. They can be done pretty quick. So for me, I like to set the stage. It's probably about a 45-minute process that will take a quick walk around the home. I like to let folks know that I'd like for them to point out anything that they've done recently to the house, or they may think that they need to do before we list. And then by the end of the appointment, we'll have a discussion of all my marketing plan, all my marketing materials, as well as give you an idea or a suggested price of what I think your house could list for in this very current market. So little bonus question that's not on here might be to ask if there's any other homes you want to make sure that I include, in my research. So sometimes they'll say, my neighbor just sold their house for X amount of dollars, and it's not in any of my paperwork, because when they say just sold, it was actually 6 years ago. So not exactly a recent comp for our measuring purposes. Or sometimes they'll reference a neighbor's house that is way larger than their house or way smaller than their house that they want to include. So if they can give me that information on the front end, that'll just make sure that I've researched and have a reason for including it or not including it, and at least be able to handle that discussion. So that's all the pre-listing questions. You're going to want to get to know the seller and the house and the condition and kind of what you're walking into ahead of time. So now the actual listing presentation, we've got about 11 key elements for a powerful listing presentation. So number one would be punctuality. So try to show up 5 minutes early. Always good to kind of call or text to confirm the appointment ahead of time. Not 5 minutes ahead of time, but earlier in the morning or the day before, saying, hey, looking forward to meeting you tomorrow at 1 o'clock, or looking forward to meeting you today at 4. Excited to see your place, and then show up early. So just a few minutes early is fine. Sometimes I like to show up a little bit earlier than that and actually circle around the neighborhood, maybe lay eyes physically on some of the comps that are in my CMA, so I can help describe where they are in correlation to the subject property, or be aware of if the other comps are on a very busy road, or they back up to train tracks, or the yard looks a mess, anything like that. So being early certainly helps with that, plus just sets the tone that you're a true professional. With that, number 2 would be a professional appearance. So you want to be dressed appropriately. Actually, you want to be dressed probably one step above the client. So you want to look like a real life professional real estate agent. So if there was ever a time to dress nicely, it would be now. So dress professionally. Number 3 would be build rapport and bond during the tour. So taking a look at the pictures on their wall, taking a look at any of their alma maters, stuff on their license plates. Sorry. Anything that you can kind of build a connection with or some rapport with would be super helpful. So use that time to build some rapport and bond during the tour. So number 4 would be have the home tour. So note for anything that might not have been reflected on your CMA, if there's any rooms that have been maybe finished off that you weren't aware of, which actually that leads back to one of the good pre-listing questions would be to confirm square footage. So you can pull it up on tax records, and then a good easy question to confirm before that appointment is, hey, saw tax records said your house is 1,800 square feet. Does that sound right to you? So yeah, just looking for anything outside of the ordinary as you're doing the tour, maybe mentally making some notes of some things that definitely need to be addressed before listing, or just some good things that you could easily give a good tip or trick on sprucing up or shining up the house before you actually go to market. So that's a good one. But in essence, you're going to have the home tour. That's number 4. 5th big element, it would be organize your presentation materials. So either have printouts or CMAs or a report or your tablet ready to go. But be organized and be ready to present. 6th important element of a listing presentation is an explanation of the current market conditions. You need to know what's happening in our current real estate market and be able to explain that to a seller. That's what they're inviting you into their house to really know is how are things going. Number 7 would be having a CMA. So having some actual comps prepared and being able to show a few various properties and how they might be most related to the subject property. And then have them with that kind of help discover the value. Like if you have good comps, by the end of you showing the other houses that sold nearby, they should be able to guess at that point what price their house should be listed at based off of the homes that you've provided. Number 8, a marketing strategy. You need to tell them what you're going to do. There's a lot of stuff that's going to be done behind the scenes. There's going to be a lot of stuff that they can actually see. They're not going to know the behind the scenes, or they're not going to know your plan of action unless you actually communicate it. So have some sort of marketing strategy. Another important element during the listing presentation is to ask questions. So don't just spout off a bunch of information. Ask them some questions, do some probing. Get some of those important elements both for your notes when you actually list the house that you can then tell others about, as well as just uncovering some of that motivation and some of the purpose of them even wanting to sell. Number 10, important element would be the objection handling. So everything we talked about last week, being ready and prepared and armed to handle any type of objections that may come up during the listing presentation. That's an important element of it, is to be ready for those things. And then the 11th biggest element of the powerful listing presentation is a closing. So how are you actually going to end your meeting? What's the next step? What is it that you're wanting them to do? What's the call to action? So some sort of closing portion of your time together is an important element of that powerful presentation. So a couple different ways you can have listing presentations. One would be the 1-minute presentation. So this is old Mike Ferry resource, but in essence, you're going to have a real positive attitude. You're going to say, hey, thanks for having me over. Excited about getting your home on the market and getting it sold. Do you mind if I take a quick look at your home? We're going to go through the home. And then you say, hey, I wrote down 3 real important questions for you. Number 1, do you absolutely have to sell your home? Great, fantastic. 2, will you price your home to sell? So will you price it to sell? Great. And then 3, do you want me to handle the sale of your property? Excellent. So now all we need to do simply is sign the contract so I can help you get what you want in the time that you want. Won't that be great? So very quick, easy, to the point. So if you know that you're the guy already and they just want you to come over and kind of get the process going, that's a good one. So for these folks, it's going to be folks who know you, they want to hire you, and they want to list at your price. They trust you as the professional. So that's kind of the 1 minute presentation. Another one is a CMA presentation. So you can kind of look at all this stuff, a lot of the very similar questions to some of the other stuff that we've already talked about. But during the CMA, you're going to say, hey, there's only 2 real issues that we need to look at tonight. Number 1, kind of your motivation to sell this home. Number 2, the price we set on your home. So it's important that you understand there's only 2 issues in selling real estate today. Are we clear on that? So it's the motivation, and then it's the price. So in the CMA, you're going to walk through it. There are 2 parts to this research. Part 1, we call fantasy land, what homeowners list homes for. Part 2, we call reality. So what real estate list and sell homes for. We're going to have to decide tonight which are we going to spend, or where are you going to spend your time, in fantasy land or reality. And so certainly the sold numbers is the best indicator of actual reality. That's when things actually a buyer opened up their wallets and said, this is what I'm willing to spend, versus fantasy land would be folks or listings that didn't sell. They got released, they got withdrawn, they expired, or as you're looking at your research, the number that they started at versus the number that actually sold at. A lot of times I'll show if there's days on market and somebody's done a price adjustment. Traditionally, after a price adjustment, then it sells, let's say, in 3 to 5 days, but maybe it took them 45 days to before they adjust it. And so then usually I'll say man, these folks could have saved themselves 45 days of constantly cleaning the house and showing the house had they only just priced it right from the beginning. Here's the price that obviously got it done, and you can tell that because just 6 days later, they actually got a contract. So another important thing just to communicate in the CMA part is we're just trying to guess at a listing price that could work. But ultimately, only a buyer determines the value. The only person who can really say what your house is worth is when somebody's willing to pay for it. Not your neighbor, not your uncle, not your parents. It's somebody who takes their checkbook out, writes a check, and hands it over to you. That's who determines the value of your home. You can also have some conversations here about value. A lot of people think that their house is worth more than others because they did X, Y, and Z. And so a good example there would be, if you were purchasing a new car and one dealership had a car for $20,000 and another dealership had the same exact car for $20,000, but it also had a CD player and a sunroof and nicer rims. Which would you buy? Which is more valuable to you? And everybody's gonna say, well, the $20,000 car that also has the CD player, the sunroof, and the nicer rims. And so thinking through value of might be the same price, but there's gonna be more value to the buyer. Usually, when I say is sellers like price, buyers like value. And so to try to get you the most price as possible, we need to give the most value possible to a buyer. So another question that you could have in the CMA is seeing if they're planning to add any more features, to increase that value to the buyer. Like, are you planning to add any more bedrooms or bathrooms or any more square footage, things like that. So again, at the end of a CMA presentation, you still want that closing line. So some other things to think through as you're working with sellers is the price objection script. In essence, this is the biggest part of the listing presentation, is figuring out a price to sell the home at. They're going to have a number in mind. You're going to have a number in mind, and somewhere in between that is the mutual agreement of what you're actually going to list at. So lots of good information here to really read over, study over, role play with some others, and think through all the different possibilities of coming up with a price if you guys are of 2 differing opinions. All right, last little section here, and this week's +1 is the powerful closing for pricing presentation. And so you want to be able to kind of close this meeting out and walk away with your next step. And so so a couple different things here. So one of the ways you can close is to give your property maximum exposure. I'm going to recommend we get a lockbox on the property right away, a sign in the front yard, and of course we'll get it on the internet as fast as possible. Now, when would you like us to come by with the sign and lockbox? And you get them to sign the contract. Another one would be, do you feel I can sell your home? Asking them, hey, do you feel like we're a good fit? Do you feel confident that I'll be able to do a good job for you and get the home sold? That's a close. Get the contract signed. Another one would be, is there anything else stopping you from listing your home with me tonight? Is there anything else that I haven't answered, that we haven't discussed, that would stop you from listing your home tonight? If they have some questions, then you can try to work through that until, okay, now there must not be anything else really stopping us from listing it tonight, so let's go ahead and get that contract signed, right? As a professional service and to start a relationship, I'll call the agents you still have appointments with. So this is for somebody who maybe is meeting with multiple agents. But anyone else that you still have appointments with, I'll go ahead and cancel those appointments for you. Would you like to know what I'm going to say? Sure. They say they thought you were terrific. They want to give you a chance, but I convinced them to list with me tonight. If you have any buyers, go ahead and bring them by. The lockbox will be on the door in the morning. Let's make a list of who I need to call. Another close, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, based on your time frame, what you want for your home, and the marketing exposure you need, I am the right person for the job. Put me to work for you right now. So kind of walking away there. Another one, have you noticed that all realtors say basically the same thing? Let me show you how I separate myself from my competition. And then you show your track record. So I sell 50 homes per year, while my competitors only average 3 per year. If you were going to hire a doctor to perform surgery, would you hire someone who does it just now and then, or does it on the side, or the doctor who's done it day in and day out for many, many years? Okay, why would you choose that doctor? Well, I agree. That's why you should hire me to go ahead and list your house. Another little close here is, when would you like to receive your first offer? So all we need to do now is simply sign this contract so I can help you get what you want in the time that you want. Won't that be great? So some good little closes there. In there, you also are going to have your plan of action for getting your home sold. So you may walk away from that appointment suggesting, okay, the next step for us is for me to have my junk removal guy come over and remove some of the extra stuff, or for you to go ahead and get your family members to pick up the heirloom dresser and the bed frame and all that, or I'm going to hire my own personal stager to come over the house and just help you walk through the home and have you move some things around to get it the most presentable for a buyer. Or you might leave them with the name of a cleaner. Let's go ahead and get a good deep clean on the house. You might go ahead and schedule the appointment for your photographer and say, hey, you might even text them on the spot saying, hey, my photographer has availability tomorrow at 2. How about we get photos taken tomorrow at 2? That way we can be listed, the next day after that. And so you might give them some homework there. You might give them some next steps there. A bunch of different examples here of different things you could be doing. In this current market, you can also have them sign a coming soon addendum, where that allows you about 21 days to get the house whipped together and in shape. But you do enter into a signed agreement then and there, and then they can spend the next 21 days getting the carpets cleaned, decluttering, getting a room painted, getting the house power washed, getting driveways resealed or whatnot. So that would be another tool that you could have in your tool belt just to make things keep going. And some other good stuff here. I mean, obviously you're going to explain all the marketing attributes that you're going to do. That's going to be part of your marketing plan. The way my CMA is set up is the whole first half of my CMA is all the marketing plan, all of the self-promotion of letting them know my track record, letting them know that I'm an experienced agent, that I am the local market expert, and also then showing all the things that I do to get as many homes sold as I do. And so I start with that because the biggest thing that they're probably wanting is the actual price. And so I want to start with that part first and leave the price for later. And a lot of times too, I might even acknowledge on the front end of like, hey, I'm sure you're very curious to know what I would suggest to list your price at. We're going to get to that. I've got that in this packet that I'm going to leave with you. But first, let's talk about some of these other things, talk about the current market conditions and my marketing plan, stuff like that. So lots of different things here on CMAs. The nicest thing about real estate, I think, is you can kind of borrow and steal and copy from other agents and make it into your own. And so take a look through all these different materials, find the questions that you really like, start role playing with those, memorize them, put them into your own words and your own context and your own mannerisms, whatever it may be. And then practice. Your listing appointment, you are interviewing for a job. So the way I describe it a lot of times is every single morning I wake up unemployed and I'm constantly looking to be hired by somebody. Listing appointment is your chance to meet with an employer who's offering you a job. And so take it seriously, dress professionally, show up early, be prepared, all those good things. And certainly you'll be able to list to last. So a few action items for the week ahead would be to prepare your listing presentation for the assigned properties. We're going to give you a property and you got to prepare a listing presentation for it. Role play your listing presentation with someone else in the +1 group. So actually practice, again, what we're talking about. And then next week, come to class prepared with your materials to present your listing presentation to the group. So pretend like you're actually getting a listing appointment. Come prepared for that. And then certainly call 15 COA contacts, write 15 handwritten notes, and try to knock out 5 pop buys. So hopefully you gathered a few little nuggets there on working with sellers. They're the fun ones. And wouldn't it be all nice if we had a lot more listings to go around? So hope that helps. Thanks.